Okay. So thank y'all for all coming tonight. My name is David Sloan, and I'm the Director of Policy, Planning, and Public Affairs for County Executive Also Brooks. And tonight is another night where we are bringing an overview of Blue Line Corridor and transit-oriented development planning and overview summaries to you directly. We're going to spend a good amount of time kind of reviewing where we are with a lot of planning and a lot that's coming to the county. But I want to thank you for taking your time and bringing your families if you did. I want to first acknowledge Ms. Small, who is the local Civic Association president here. Thank you for all you do, ma'am. Thank you very much. She came into the office about a month ago for a meeting with civic leaders. We promised we would bring one of these meetings here, and so we will continue to make good on those promises starting today. And I also want to acknowledge all the agency staff and directors that are here, Director Crooms from DOE, Director Spazio from DHCD, and then folks from several other agencies who are here who will stay after the meeting is over for any direct questions. And I will say there is a lot to unpack here, and if we don't get through everyone's question, you can also email us, and we'll make sure that anything discussed tonight, where we have answers that are given out, they will be transcribed and sent out after the meeting with the meeting materials. So you don't really need to take notes, because all this is coming right to you via email after we're done. Also, on behalf of OCR, because Director Davis isn't here yet, but Walter, do you want to speak on our behalf, or would you like? Go ahead. Walter James, everybody, why don't you come on up?
Y'all hear me?
All right.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Walter James. I serve as the Outreach Unit Chief for the Prince Georgians County Office of Community Relations. And on behalf of our Director Anisha Davis, as well as our Associate Deputy Director, Courtney Marriott, thank you so much for being here tonight. This is what community is about. Coming out, giving your input, hearing from our citizens, hearing from the residents is so important. Thank you to Mr. David Sloan, as well as to our DCAO, Andrew Rogers, who always does a great job, and we've been all around the county doing some great work. I do want to recognize some of my colleagues that are here this evening from OCR. We have Ms. Desiree DeVille. She's our interim unit chief for programs, as well as the assistant to the associate deputy director, Courtney Marriott. Many of you know Mr. James Rogers, who works in our common ownership division. And as Mr. Sloan stated, any questions that you may have, look for any of us. Look for any of us that are in the red shirts or in the black shirt, and we can definitely answer some questions. I do not want to leave out my good friend, Ms. Jennifer Hawkins, who's also here with us this evening. She's our programs manager for 311 On The Go. But again, thank you so much for having us here this evening.
Thank you, sir. And Councilwoman Ivy, if you'd like to say welcome on behalf of your district. All right.
Welcome to District 5.
All right. So there is a lot to cover, but on behalf of the county executive, we've wanted to make a couple of points clear at these meetings. One, it's good to be back in person after COVID. You know, everyone did a great job of staying together and communicating during COVID. People's lives were literally saved because of the information that was shared so freely from leaders and from neighborhood residents about how to get relief. And I think we learned, how to work together, whether we're in person or apart. But it is really, really good to be back together in one space, talking again about the county's progress and our overall goals. She would want me to say that the county is on track to achieve a lot of the policy priorities that she set out and promised to achieve on behalf of residents and what they asked for. We haven't fallen that far behind via COVID. And in fact, we've gained a lot of our progress back. And that's because we simply work together from community to community across the county. And so that work continues. Today, the content is the Blue Line Corridor that we're going to discuss and transit-oriented development. To lead that conversation, to my right, is the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, Ms. Angie Rogers, for Economic Development. And you might ask yourself, what does a DCA do? Well, the county is kind of organized in this way. There's the county executive and her chief of staff who oversees 14 to 18 divisions of specific work. And then there is the chief administrative officer and 5 deputies who oversee all the agencies and what they do. And they all collaborate as a unit. And the cluster that DCAL Rogers runs focuses on economic development. And she is our favorite DCA. So DCAL Rogers, I'm going to turn it over to you.
They like me because I'm a little silly. It is good to be here with you all tonight. And as David said, we are going to spend some time talking about the county's economic development platform, and particularly our focus on transit-oriented development, which, we'll get into sort of what that means. But for us, it is, basically the development that takes place inside of the Beltway, and particularly around our metro stations. From an economic development perspective, it is what me and my cluster focus on. It is how, we focus our capacity, how we focus our resources. It's not that we don't care about sort of what happens in other places in the county, but in terms of where we think our best opportunity is to get more jobs, more amenities, more housing, and particularly affordable housing and workforce housing. For us, it is inside the Beltway and around transit, and that's the focus of our new platform. I know there are a couple of people here this evening who have heard this presentation before. We've started doing some smaller meetings, as David indicated, in the office last fall, and now we're sort of branching out to these larger community meetings. So if you have heard the presentation before, and I know Ms. Mall, you have heard it, my friend back here who was questioning me as we came in, he came to the first community meeting. Tell me his name again. Yuri. I know Yuri has heard it, and I'll just say, if you've heard the presentation before, I'm going to make the same jokes. And so don't tell the others that you've heard them before. So just diving into our economic development platform for the county. So we set a new economic development platform in 2021. And we really set that platform to be sort of a holistic look at economic development and to guide our activities going forward. Most people think that economic development is really mostly about sort of business development and corporate attraction, that it's only about growing jobs. But good economic development plans these days focus on really sort of developing communities holistically. So we're not just trying to bring jobs. We're also trying to make sure that we have quality and safe places to live for a wide range of families. We're trying to make sure that folks have access to open space, that they have access to the arts. So we really built our economic development platform so that we could focus on all of those core areas and make sure that we direct our tools and resources to the places where we're saying we want to focus. So when we started out developing this new platform, we thought a little bit about, like, who do we want to be when we grow up? And really pulling from some of those issues that we know county residents have been talking about for decades as sort of barriers for our economic development in the county. We knew that we wanted to be the place where the region lives and works. So I think for a very long time, Prince George's County was sort of imagined as just a bedroom community for the rest of the region. So, you laid your head in Prince George's County, but you went to work somewhere else. And that meant that you probably also, shopped in a grocery store somewhere else on the way home, or you went out for a drink after work somewhere else before you got home. And so somewhere along the way, we sort of figured out that being just a bedroom community, wasn't a sustainable model for our economic development, that we need to be the place where folks both live and work. If you talk to, and we're talking about transit-oriented development tonight, if you talk to the folks who run WMATA, they'll say that, their trains are only full going one way during peak hours on Metro, and that is not sustainable for them as a business model. They want the trains going full both ways during peak hours. And in order for trains to be full going both ways, you got to have folks living and working in those places. We wanted to build a more sustainable economy. Many of you probably heard the county executive talk about the fact that we are heavily, heavily, heavily dependent on our residential taxes in the county as opposed to our commercial tax base. I just got fresh numbers this week, and our 2022 numbers are that we are 29%, Jose, commercial, and 71% residential, and that is the flip scenario that we see in places like Montgomery County or in DC. They have much more of a commercial tax base to depend on. And because they have more of a commercial tax base to depend on, that means that their economies are really more sustainable than ours. So when we have economic downturns in this country, many times, especially if it's not a super serious downturn, you will see the DC area as a whole sometimes doesn't feel the effects really of these downturns at all, not like they do in other parts of the country. So you might see the Midwestern cities or southern cities kind of suffering during downturns, and the DC Metro will still be chugging along, still going strong. The exception to that is Prince George's County. So every time we've had a downturn, we are slower to bounce back than our neighbors in the region. And part of that is that dynamic, between sort of what we get to depend on and what they get to depend on. There are other jurisdictions in the region that have a heavy federal presence. And that's something that insulates them in a way that it doesn't insulate us. So we wanted to set goals to make our economy more sustainable. We want to grow the number of people who call the county home, and particularly inside the Beltway and around transit. Newsflash, Prince George's County is growing. So that is a fact. I think, for us, the question is, can we be strategic about where that growth happens? And so if we, want that growth to be concentrated inside the Beltway, around transit, where it, pulls less on our, police and education resources, our infrastructure for the county, then we wanted to set a goal where we recognize that we're growing, and we recognize that we want to continue to grow. This feeds the rest of our goals, but let's be strategic about where that happens. We want to preserve diversity even as we grow, and this, was, us really thinking about affordable housing and thinking about that as an important piece of a holistic economic development platform. If we went forward on a platform where we're only thinking about the commercial side, only the growth of the commercial side, then we know how this looks in some other places. You end up with the kind of growth that can squeeze households out. And so we wanted to approach this from the beginning, thinking about how we make space for a wide range of households. Creating access and equity across all of our communities. You all have probably heard the county exec also talk a lot about the number of communities in the county that are food deserts, or what we technically call low-income, low-access areas. So we wanted a goal to focus on that. And finally, we wanted a goal that would focus on being a destination. So in order to grow, and particularly in order to grow jobs and to attract, employers from across the world, what is it about Prince George's County that's recognizable to them? I use the example all the time that if I showed you a group of brownstones in Harlem, you would probably know you were looking at Harlem without somebody telling you you were looking at Harlem. If I showed you a group of row houses in D.C., you'd probably know you were looking at D.C. without us telling you. This is what being a destination is, or that's a simplified definition of what it means to be a destination, to be recognizable, so that when the world sees you, they know who you are, they know what your brand is, and they know if they partner with you, right? If they bring a job to your jurisdiction, if they decide to buy a home there, they know what they're getting into. Next slide. So we set these goals for this platform, increasing the number of people who live and work, increasing our commercial tax collections by $100 million. These are all 2030 goals. And I'll say we've sort of simplified them for this presentation, but there is a much longer document that is our economic development platform, and it is on the county's website. If any of you want to look at these goals in detail and see sort of what makes them up. We set the increased population, particularly in transit-oriented development areas, by 50,000. That is probably, a conservative number given how much we're growing. We set a goal to develop 26,000 new units of housing, 75% of which would be affordable. We also set goals for preservation and for doing more multifamily housing. Our county did a housing study that completed, I think it was the end of 2018, and one of the things that it found is that we have a lot of townhouses and single-family homes. We do not have a lot of multifamily, and certainly not a lot of condos. And when your housing stock, when the housing typology is imbalanced in that way, then you start to miss whole pieces of the market who might be interested in living and also maybe working in Prince George's County. I'm going to talk a bit about the Blue Line Corridor, which is our anchor initiative for our economic development platform. So one of the things that we were interested in was not just sort of, setting these goals and seeing if we met them, but we wanted to set this anchor initiative that really could be the culmination of all of the goals that are in our platform, and a way for us to figure out how we can work better together as both public and private partners, setting really a new model for place-based economic development that, we could try out in a place in the county, and then hopefully also then take that model to other places. And so the Blue Line Corridor, which runs from Capitol Heights Metro all the way out to what is now downtown Largo. We've renamed it since we did this graphic. And also includes Central Avenue or Maryland 214. We started out in 2020, sort of the spring to summer of 2020, doing a public land study where we looked at over 400 parcels of land across the county that were owned by us or our quasi-public partners. And out of that, we were looking for, sort of where is there an opportunity for us to really come in and be a catalyst for, the next big economic development destination. And the Blue Line Corridor was a place where we and our quasi-public partners owned a lot of land. It also happened to be on this metro line, sort of coming in from out of DC. I'll say it was attractive to me because for years when I was working in downtown DC, I would get on the metro at Largo Town Center and take it all the way in, straight shot, into DC, and I would often think about sort of what are we, missing on this side that, where we could draw some of that success that DC is seeing, we can sort of draw it into the county, because I would pass through, stations like Benning Road Metro. Anybody familiar with the shrimp boat? Right? Everybody has a shrimp boat where Benning Road Metro is. There was a year, I can't remember, when I was working in one of the neighborhoods around Benning Road Metro, but a couple of years ago, that neighborhood was one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. Not in the region, in the country. And so I would think about sort of what's going on that side that, we need to sort of bring to this side. So we set this new platform, and next slide. So we set it and really wanted to envision it as a destination for the county, for the state, and also for the region. We started to think about branding this initiative around sports, entertainment, and culture for a couple of different reasons. One, obviously the sort of one of the bookends of the corridor is the Commander Stadium, and there's been a lot of talk and continues to be a lot of talk about what happens with that site. But also we, we're doing this under the leadership of a county executive who was really focused on youth sports and really focused on this idea of sort of leveraging all of the youth sports facilities that are in the county already, really quality facilities, and this rich history, particularly in sports, sort of leveraging that into becoming the youth sports capital of the country. And so we thought that, there was a good opportunity to start to brand this corridor around that sports, entertainment, and culture, to bring some of the amenities that county residents have been waiting for, but also leverage the kinds of things that we have here already. Next. So, we started visioning for this in late 2020. We didn't want it to be something that sort of sat on a shelf for a year, and then we sort of figured out what to do with it. And I'll say we didn't want it to sit on the shelf, for a year or more, because the plan was really based on, probably 15 years of planning that had been going on sort of in these pockets and overall along that stretch of the county. And so from our perspective, a lot of what county residents wanted to see, we already knew because they had been telling us for 15 years, what they wanted to see. And so the plan that we came up with really sort of meshed all of that planning together, those 15 years of planning together, really sort of synthesized it into a vision that we could then go and sort of, sell to state legislators and others who might give us money, who might invest in us to be able to push this along. So we had a little bit of success early. I'll say we went in that first year and we thought we'll go in and we'll ask for a little bit of funding to kind of do some infrastructure improvements, do things like pedestrian safety. You'll hear me talk about this complete streets work, which is all about sort of transforming a thoroughfare from something that is car-centric to something that is multimodal, meaning also safe for pedestrians, safe for cyclists, safe for scooters. So we thought we'd ask for a little bit of money. We were so successful and people were so excited. We came back the next year and asked for more. And over 2 years, we've been able to get $466 million in investment for the Blue Line corridor. And some of that is for doing those types of improvements that we talked about. So doing complete streets improvements along Arena Drive, Morgan Boulevard, and we also, this past year, got our first funding to start doing complete streets on Central Avenue. I'm going to show you some visuals later. I know some folks are like, what, Central Avenue? That's like 6 lanes of very fast traffic. I joked in the last meeting that I have been guilty of driving fast along Central Avenue. That ticket that I mentioned, I still need to pay. But the intention is to turn even Central Avenue into a thoroughfare that is safe for pedestrians, for cyclists, for scooters, because I say this all the time, if we build a bunch of stuff along Central Avenue and the only way you can get to it is to get in your car, drive to it, park, get out, then we've missed some of the magic that happens around transit-oriented development and missed that, foot traffic and people sort of happening by Yuri was talking to me about wanting a cafe at the corner of Central and Morgan. A cafe is a hard thing to survive if somebody has to drive to it in order for it to survive. So we've got money for some of those things, but then we also got money in this past session to build some signature projects that we really hope will start to catalyze the private development that we want to happen on the corridor. And I'm going to take you through some of the details about some of the signature projects that we got funding to do. So first is an amphitheater, and we have envisioned this as an amphitheater that would have a capacity of between 7,500 and 10,000 people. It would be something that can flex from smaller, sort of completely enclosed events. So an event, say, up to 2,000 or 2,500 people, to something that is partially open, so covered, events up to 3,000 or 4,000 to the full-on outdoor open venue or open events, and we envisioned it that way, particularly because we want to build something that is going to be available for events for more of the year, so not just the warm months, but year-round, and also something that could flex between smaller sort of community-focused events, to the full-on festival or concert. Next slide. So these are just some precedents that we looked at as we were visioning for the amphitheater project in the county. Next slide. The next venue is a market hall. This is a venue that we anticipate would work in conjunction and be sited with the amphitheater, that these are two things that can kind of complement each other. So the big example for that, obviously, in the region is Union Market. That's sort of the premier concept. But this would be, something that obviously would incubate food-based businesses, arts-based businesses, textiles, et cetera. And part of the thing that we're excited about this market hall and the level of public investment that we'll put into it is that we anticipate that public investment is going to allow us to support more smaller businesses, minority businesses. I use the example of the Le Fantôme food hall up at Riverdale Park, which is a great food hall, and I told people in the last meeting, if you haven't been, please go. It's great. One of the things that we know about that food hall, though, is that the sort of buy-in for vendors there was, I think, $25,000. And so that's a high level of buy-in for, some particularly small and minority businesses to be able to get into. And so what we want to do or hope to do with this food hall is create that opportunity for some smaller businesses to buy in and sort of grow in this concept, and hopefully grow to the point where then they open their own storefront, which is what we see with a lot of businesses that start in market hall type concepts. Next slide. So these are just some other examples of market halls that we looked at in order to vision for the one that we'll do here in the county. Next slide. Youth Sports Fieldhouse. So I talked about our desire and vision to be the youth sports capital of the country. And we, have a lot of really quality facilities already. The niche that we want this facility to fill is really for international competition. So we want to build a youth field house to international competition standards. And roughly 2/3 of the year would feed international and national competitions. 1/3 of the year would be locally serving. I talked about these facilities being envisioned to be catalysts. So this is exactly what we mean, particularly by a catalyst. So if 2/3 of the year folks are coming in from international and national destinations to go to competitions at our field house, then that means that they are going to be staying in hotels, and they're going to be eating in our restaurants and going to our cafes. And so in order for us to, sort of seed that kind of activity from the private sector, these are the kinds of things that we are looking to build with the funding that we've gotten in order to catalyze that private activity and to feed it once it's there. Next slide. This is just another example of the kind of field house that we're talking about. But this would be a completely indoor covered facility there is a list of, I think, about 10 different sports that this facility would flex between, so 12 to 16 courts, and we are talking basketball, volleyball, indoor soccer, futsal, MMA, pickleball, gymnastics. I know I'm missing several because there's about 10 of them that the venue would flex between. But there is tremendous need for this in the county. I use the example all the time of our tourism Visitors Bureau, Experience Prince George's, trying to find space for a basketball tournament to happen in the county, and they put down floors in the ballrooms down at the Gaylord in order to host this basketball tournament. These are this is the kind of need that we are trying to fill. Next slide. Central Library and Cultural Center. So when we initially started visioning for the Blue Line Corridor, we were visioning with Rhonda Dallas back there, who's our Arts and Humanities Council director. We started visioning for a new cultural center along the Blue Line Corridor, and we were envisioning it as the kind of thing where it would be, you know, an iconic design. You walk out of one of our metro stations and you see this iconic design for our cultural center. So again, talking about placemaking and how do you sort of, you know, do things that then end up in magazines, and folks are like, that's in Prince George's County, and I'm going to make a trip there to visit that, or, you know, like now I'm going to consider locating my company there because this is a place that wasn't on my radar, but now it is. So we started visioning for this cultural center. And once we finished the vision, libraries came along and they said, well, we've been thinking about a downtown library as well, and there's lots of different precedents to do libraries and cultural centers together. Why don't we start planning for this together? So we are still envisioning this as something that would have, you know, really iconic design and be really striking, and the two uses really working together. Next slide. So these are some precedents that we've been looking at, and I think the point that these precedents drive home is really that we've been visioning for our library and cultural center in a way that really emphasizes them as gathering places. And so, you know, anything that you might want to bring people together for. So if it's, you know, arts, or if it's some workforce activity, that there are lots of different reasons, lots of different uses for which this will be a gathering place for our community. Next slide. Civic Plaza. This is envisioned for the Wayne K. Curry building, which is where the council is and the executive. It is our administration building now. One of the things that we thought a lot about when we were doing this visioning was that, you know, we have this idea of turning, you know, downtown Largo into a true downtown that looks like other downtowns, not just in the region, but in the country, in the world. And often what you don't have are buildings that are surrounded by a sea of surface parking. And so we said to ourselves, let's come up with a project where we start with ourselves. If we are encouraging walkability, bikeability, people sort of on the street and interacting. Let's start with ourselves. And so the Civic Plaza is meant to be that engaging piece of our new downtown and us, sort of starting with ourselves at our county administration building to push that vision along. Next slide. These are just precedents that we have been looking at for planning for what a civic plaza at Wayne-Key Curry might look like. Next slide. So this slide just gives you a sense of some of the opportunities that will start to come out this year around these facilities. So it's everything from naming rights to design and construction opportunities. We know that some of our venues will need their own structured parking, so there will be those opportunities. And so we, highlight this because these are, things that we are pushing forward with public funding, but they are also opportunities for our business community in the county. And particularly, we, have had this great push for minority business participation in many of our projects, and we want to continue that with the Blue Line Corridor. We were actually out yesterday for a press conference with 4 minority developers who are doing 5 projects already along the Blue Line Corridor. So highlighting the fact that this is, something that we are serious about and plan to use these opportunities to push those goals as well. Next slide. So I just want to run through and show you a bit of what the Blue Line Corridor vision was, sort of what we started from. And I'll say, again, if you go and look at our full economic development platform, you'll also see sort of all of the progression slides. So starting from sort of existing conditions and how we envision that these places, particularly at the metro nodes, would grow and sort of fill in to reach the vision that we've set. Next. So this is the overarching vision for downtown Largo. The great part about about downtown Largo is that lots of this development has already started. So the new hospital is already there. The new cancer center is under construction. The Carillon development is headed into its second phase. Lots of what's going on around the Civic Center, or what we call the Civic Center, around our government buildings, that is continuing to grow. And so the great part about Largo is that it's already moving. Next. This is the view sort of at the Largo metro station. If you're sort of standing on Grand Avenue and looking toward the metro station, right now you've got some buildings sort of coming up, but the idea is to really fill this in with some of the densest development that you would see in the corridor, multifamily and office with retail on the bottom, and really making the downtown the sort of premier transit hub. Next. I can't remember if I mentioned the Central Avenue Connector Trail. If I didn't, forgive me, because it is a huge, important part of the Blue Line Corridor plan. So the Central Avenue Connector Trail is a bicycle and pedestrian trail that will run from Capitol Heights down at the Prince Georgians DC line, all the way through the Blue Line Corridor to downtown Largo and up to the stadium. And so one of the things that we envision, again, thinking about placemaking and doing things that then get associated with Prince George's County, and you know you're looking at us, whether we're named or not, is that the part of the pedestrian bridge that runs over 495, that we would use that opportunity to create this sort of iconic bridge structure. So even as folks are driving along 495, then they know they're passing by downtown Prince George's. Next. This is Morgan Boulevard. So one of the big assets at Morgan Boulevard was that just south of the metro station, there's 50 acres of developable land that hadn't been touched. And so part of, what we started visioning for Morgan Boulevard was how do we start to go in and sort of imagine what a street grid might look like and sort of see that infrastructure and really start to create some developable paths so that you don't end up with a situation where, a developer comes along and maybe they bite off the corner, maybe they bite off that chunk, but then they can't really do anymore. Or they, bite off some other chunk, that may or may not make sense. And so we vision for Morgan Boulevard to say, hey, let us as public partners go in, figure out what the infrastructure needs to look like, start to see that, and then developers can come in and sort of create something with the paths that we create. Next slide. So this is the slide I wanted to show you all about Central Avenue. So this is what we envision for Central Avenue at Morgan Boulevard, but really the complete streets work that is meant to turn this from something that is car-centric into something that is multimodal would go all the way up. So from Central at the Prince George's DC border all the way up to the Exchange. So when I started working with our design and consulting team on this, and they said, Angie, there are strategies. They exist to turn this from something that is only safe for cars to something where you can have this kind of engagement. And so when we say complete streets, that is what we are talking about. It's the, putting in protected bike lanes. It is, creating the right, sort of separation so that more buses can get through. It, might be in places, putting in street parking, so because that slows down traffic. So we have been looking at a range of strategies, and on Central Avenue, but also on some of the other thoroughfares along the Blue Line corridor. So Morgan Boulevard, Arena, Lotsford. We've been looking at these thoroughfares to see what are the right strategies in the right places that then starts to turn what we have today into this. Next slide. This is Addison Road, Seat Pleasant, so I'll call attention to some of the complete streets strategies that I talked about that start to slow down traffic and starts to move people to other forms of transportation, other forms of getting around. But I will say we do have quite a bit of private activity also around Addison Road and Seat Pleasant. That's where a couple of our projects that we were highlighting yesterday are in this area as well. I'll also say that the right side of the screen is a lot of Metro-owned land. And so that is also, these are places where we get to be catalysts, where we and our public partners own the land. And what we're trying to catalyze, and if anybody's familiar with this area, on the left side of the screen, where we've got these beautiful buildings rendered, a lot of that is surface parking lot right now. And so when we talk about being a catalyst, we mean sort of doing things that creates so much value in the corridor that the person who owns it today, they want to do something different with it. You know, if you buy a house for $100,000, and all of a sudden today that house is worth $1 million, you're going to think twice about it, right? Like, how do I use this in order to do something different with my life and with my business? So that is what we are trying to sort of seed in this corridor. Next slide. This is just another view from the street level of Central Avenue and sort of what it would look like with the Central Avenue Connector Trail, which would run through like past the Metro on that side. At some point it jumps Central Avenue to the other side, but at Addison Road it's on the Metro side. And so this is an example of the kind of activation that we can start to see on that side of the street. Next slide. And Capitol Heights. The beautiful thing about Capitol Heights is that lots of that land is publicly owned between the town of Capitol Heights, the county, and WMATA, and we're all finally talking about sort of what the development plan would and should really look like in this place. But that's the great thing about Capitol Heights. I think we thought when we were visioning that we might be a ways off from sort of moving something at Capitol Heights. But, you know, I think the sort of biggest landowner there that we needed was Metro, and they sort of did their planning, came back and said, okay, county, you know, like you got this nice blue line corridor plan. If you're ready to talk about Capitol Heights, let's talk about Capitol Heights. Next slide. So these are just some of the developments I was talking about yesterday. We did this press conference with minority developers who are working on projects along the corridor. And so these are some of the projects that are in the pipeline and coming. This is 210 on the Park. It sits right at the Capitol Heights Metro. This one is a partnership between our redevelopment authority in the county and a minority developer, AWASH and Associates. Next, 6500 Central Avenue. This is right at the Addison Road Metro. This one is a partnership between the Community Builders, which is a national affordable housing developer, and Harambe Community Partners. Lloyd Blackwell, who heads Harambe. This land that this is being built on was actually owned by Mr. Blackwell's father and was passed down to him. And he wanted to do something meaningful with it and bring meaningful and quality development to this corridor, you know, to honor his father and honor his family. And so they are bringing this multifamily development to the corridor. Next slide. This is Hampton Park. This is just beyond Morgan Boulevard Metro. The developer there is Velocity. And they are, so this is a large mixed-use, multi-phase development that is already in development, but bringing office, restaurants, hotel, multifamily to the corridor. Next slide. This is Park Place. This project is being headed by Banneker Ventures, also a minority developer, and this one will sit on the other side of the street across from the Community Builders and Harambe's group at Addison Road Metro. So these next slides are just, we've talked a lot about the Blue Line Corridor, but just so you know, we focus on work in other parts of the county as well, and like I said, really focused on transit-oriented development. So we're doing a lot of work along the Purple Line. Our work there right now is really focused on making sure that we are using our resources to preserve businesses along the Purple Line, and also to preserve housing along the Purple Line, affordable housing along the Purple Line. Next slide. Highlighting Greenbelt, particularly as part of our federal jobs strategy. As part of our economic development platform, we want to bring more federal jobs to the county. Remember, I said that's part of what sort of insulates some of our neighbors against some of those downturns, all of those federal jobs that they have. And so Prince George's County wants its share as well. We've had some successes lately. We got Citizenship and Immigration Services put their new office down at Branch Avenue. We've got the Bureau of Labor Statistics coming in at Suitland, the Suitland Federal Center. We've got the Bureau of Engraving and Printing coming in at BARC. Near Greenbelt, and obviously the big tuna that we're trying to land is the FBI. Next slide. Again, Suitland, our work there has really been sort of building and rebuilding a neighborhood to complement the federal center there. So most of our work is focused on building new residential units. We have our next phases that are going to start to bring in multifamily, retail, hotel. And so I think, within the past year, we've probably had 2 or 3 solicitations out for next phases in Suitland, and those are going to continue. Next slide. Oh, we're at the end. You guys are done listening to me talk, I'm sure. But as we like to say, greatness grows here. Our economic development vision for the county is to grow this ecosystem of jobs, housing, and amenities. We do not want to just be the economic engine of the state. We already are. We also want to be the economic engine of the region. So we want to be able to compete on a level playing field with a DC and a Fairfax and be able to drive what happens in the DC metro region. And so with that.
Yeah. So I want to acknowledge Councilmember Olson, who came in during the presentation, and the other neighbors who are here. Happens to be the council member who represents my neighborhood growing up in Beacon Heights. And did we, the New Carrollton slide I did not see in there, or did we go over it?
They're tired of hearing me talk.
But we should talk about New Carrollton.
We should talk about New Carrollton.
Yeah.
New Carrollton. In New Carrollton Metro, there's a huge master plan development that has been going on around New Carrollton. It is, probably sort of, I don't know, maybe a quarter to midway at this point. We'll call it 30%. Here's the great thing about New Carrollton. With the number of transit options that will be running through New Carrollton once the Purple Line is there, it will be, I'm calling it, the premier transit hub in the region. And as I like to refer to New Carrollton, the gateway to the East Coast. So if you can hop on a train and easily sort of be in the DC metro, or somewhere along the East Coast, in an hour and a half, then that helps you sort of choose where you live plus work, and hopefully you choose us in Prince George's County. New Carrollton is lined up with the number of jobs that we know are coming there already. It will be the largest jobs hub in the county, but also now people live there. If you haven't been to New Carrollton lately, there's some beautiful new apartments out there. People live there, and the next phase is going to see, actually, the phases that just got completed saw the first retail space, so amenities are coming to New Carrollton. So New Carrollton is exciting. Since Councilmember Olson is here, I'll talk about a new one that's in his district, which is Aviation Landing. which is super exciting, right at the College Park Metro. So we took a county-owned parcel of land and disposed of it, and it got picked up by the University of Maryland, along with their development partners, Terrapin Development Partners, and they are expanding. This will be the sort of expansion of the Discovery District. And so a focus in terms of jobs and business development and corporate attraction on science, research, technology, but then also housing amenities, because we do mixed use around here.
Right.